And so thank you for welcoming us. And it's such a pleasure to be here this morning to celebrate this special Christmas Eve service with you all. And thank you, Moksanim, again for inviting us to be here. It's such a joy to be here and having this worship together. And if somebody can let me know when I have 10 minutes and 5 minutes left, because otherwise I'm going to keep you here for 2 hours. So I'm sure. So I'm just reminiscing about my Christmas. I remember that was our favorite time of the year growing up because my parents, you'll see a picture, older picture, they adopted 4 kids and 6 kids actually. And so I remember, when you have Christmas, the house we grew up in only had 1 bathroom for 8 years, 1 bathroom and 3 bedrooms. And literally the living room would be filled with wrapping presents everywhere. You could barely move. So my parents were just wonderful parents, and the favorite time of the year was Christmas. And another Christmas memory I have is when our kids were young, we're living in southern Indiana, and they were so thinking, oh, I want snow for Christmas. And my wife told Richard and Rachel, in southern Indiana is further south than Louisville, Kentucky is. They said, well, no, it doesn't snow here. No, we're gonna pray there's gonna be snow. Then, the faithful prayer of a child at 3 and 5 years old. Next morning, they woke up, there was snow on the ground in Evansville, Indiana. So I remember that Christmas as well. So this afternoon, what I'd like to do is share my testimony of God's grace in my life, and then also share about what MAP does. And from the bottom of my heart, I want to thank Moksanim and the Tree Life Church for your most generous donations of MAP, and I'll share with you where those funds are going to. And so I'm very humbled that church of this size would give that generous gift to MAP twice, and I'll talk about it in a couple minutes here. So if I go to the first slide, please. I was born in South Korea, and when I was 1 year old, that's far left, that's me in the swing, and that goes to show you all kids are cute, right? So that was me when I was 1 year old, and my father, that's my Korean father. So when he went to a funeral to a neighbor, a friend whose child had passed away, but he did not realize the child passed away from having polio. And most of you young people, you don't know what polio is. But the vaccine did not make it over to South Korea back then. So when my father came home, unbeknownst to him, he passed the polio virus to me. And he felt personally liable. I mean, he just felt so bad that he gave me polio from that point on, my Korean brother told me, because we found our Korean family later, that my dad never smiled again because he was so just devastated that he gave me the polio. And it was not his fault. Polio was everywhere, but he felt so devastated that he inflicted me with polio. And so when I was 5 years old, my parents took me to these Eastern doctors trying to get me to walk and try all these herbal type of medicine and where they burn you with your, looks like cigarettes, but they're herbal cigarette things, and touching your back and the legs and everywhere. And I was only 5 years old, and I remember saying, it's not working, stop, it's really painful. But they were trying their best to see if they can get me to walk. So when that came to no avail, they heard about a Christian orphanage called Holt International Children's Services, and my father abandoned me there because he was afraid that if I had parents, maybe they would not accept me because I had parents. So I remember the night before my dad took me, he told me to cry when he dropped me off, and I said, okay, I'll cry. And so I remember the night before he dropped me off, he got really drunk because it must have been so painful, because I never remembered my dad drinking, but that night must have been so painful for him to drop me off. So, and the next morning we got up and he took me, it's in Ilsan, Korea, where he dropped me off at the foot of the doorstep of the orphanage. And so he told me to cry, and sure enough, when I cried, somebody got me. But then I would crawl back to where my Abanim dropped me off, thinking he was going to come back for me the next day. So he didn't come back, so I would crawl back, and because I didn't have crutches or wheelchair, so I would literally crawl back to where he dropped me off. And so he did that. I did that for literally over a week, and then I used to, cry at night. And maybe I did something wrong. I was being punished. So maybe that's what I thought. He would never come back for me because he never left me like that alone. About a week later, they brought my sister, and I'll share the story about her. And then they allow her to stay with me because I convinced them she was my sister. You'll see a picture in a minute. But that's a picture of me. Oops. Yeah, if you go back 1 second. That's when I was about 8 years, I believe, before I had my leg braces. So I would walk with crutches, and as soon as I could walk, I was able to go to school. And the lady in the picture, she's gone home to be with the Lord. Her name is Beulah Strumchek, and she was a sister of the founder's wife. And she sponsored me when I was in the orphanage, and she told the orphanage worker, give me a really strong kid that won't die on me, because the child that she had sponsored earlier actually passed away, was so sick. So the orphanage worker actually was the founder's daughter. She was a nurse, and she said, well, I'm going to pick you if somebody won't never die on you. Myung-soo is my Korean name. He's so ornery, he'll never die on you. So she let her sponsor me for 5 years until I was adopted. So she faithfully sent $10 a month. And back in the 60s, that was a lot of money to send $10 a month to me. And her husband worked for the postal service, and they had 3 children of their own. So he told her, if you want to send $10 a month to Myung-soo, you have to make your own, you have to earn your own money. So she said, okay, I'll do that. She used to clean bathrooms and clean houses every week, so she could send me $10 a month. So I'm very mindful that the donors of MAP also give very sacrificially to MAP. And many people just give us like $25, $10. So we're so grateful for their donations. And so I had a chance to meet her, actually, when I was working at World Vision in the early 2000s. And so we had a chance to meet. Her name is Beulah Strumchek. So we met her, and she lived in a very double-wide trailer, very humble life. And so when we met her, she said, I used to pray for you. So I'm thinking one day I would be adopted, come to America, go to good school, get a good job, have a wonderful family, have a beautiful wife. That's what I'm thinking, right? She said, I pray one day you will come to know the Lord. And because of her faithfulness in praying, we're the first Christians in our family. And so I'll share about my faith walk a little bit later. So then now she's gone home with the Lord. So I used to pray in the orphanage, and I'm going to kind of weave my journey with you. So I didn't know who Jesus was. I didn't know who God was, but he was the only person I could talk to. So I would just talk to God at nighttime. God, would you one day get me a family? Would you one day? So I just talked to God. I didn't know who Christ was. But I knew he was listening. So I just talked to God. I remember one time they said, if you memorized all the verses in the Bible, we'll get you a Korean Bible. So I was good. I memorized all the books in the Bible, all 66 chapters. I can't do it now, but I did then. I memorized all. They gave me a Korean Bible, and we used to sing Christmas carols and hymns, and it was just it was tough growing up there, but we also had Christian faith there. So if you go to the next slide, please. So that's my Korean family. When I was a kid, I was about 12 years old there. When I was about 1966. I was 10. So I came over. My little sister in the halo. That's not a halo. That's a charcoal. It's my Mary Ellen. She actually lives in Palm Springs, and we'll see her tomorrow for Christmas. But when my parents went to the orphanage in 1964, they were leaving candy to all the kids who were left behind, because there were so many kids that could not be adopted. So they felt bad they can adopt more. So they're passing out candies to the kids that were left behind. And my sister, Myung-hee, she took the candy and she ran off. So my parents said, well, that's odd. Why did she run off that way? Doesn't she like us? Well, why did she run off? So they asked the orphanage worker, what's happening here? And she just took off on us. She said, well, she has a handicapped brother, and she's taking him candy first. I trained her really well. She was my legs. But they were so touched by her act of kindness, they said, oh, we need to go meet her brother. So they took the time, went to the back of the orphanage where all the handicapped kids were kept, and they saw me playing on the ground, and we need to adopt both of them. Now, has she not done that? Has she just eaten the candy right there and didn't do that? I won't be sitting here today, and she won't be adopted either. Because back then they had immigration law that says you can only adopt 2 children from developing country. And they had already adopted 2. So they said, my mom, I remember, said, you will be our children someday. So they literally start writing to congressmen. By then they had moved from Pasadena, California to Anchorage, Alaska. And they start writing and calling the congressman. It took them 2 years, and they had an attachment, or they called a rider to a bill. And it took them 2 years. And when President Johnson signed the bill, we had a rider on there in 1966, August. As soon as he signed it, then we could come over. So they really worked 2 years to work everything they could to get us over. And they were faithful. I remember writing letters to them in Korean, and they would translate it and bring it back. And I was very boring. I would always say, how's the weather? Things like that. So, but they were I was so fortunate my parents did that to adopt us. So we came over to Anchorage, Alaska. Can you imagine? I just remember, I think you obviously know what Migook stands for, which is beautiful country. And we just had this imagination. So, wow, I'm going to go to America. And you've always heard about America just being, it's got to be better than the orphanage, right? So I'm thinking, wow. When I land in Anchorage, Alaska, you had pristine mountains on one side, you had the ocean. And I still remember the day when they picked us up, and they had 6 kids then. The young one wasn't born yet. And so my parents had my G.I. Joe and a radio just for me, for the first time I ever had toys. And so it was just a dream come true. And so I grew up in Anchorage, Alaska, and went to regular school. And for the first time, when I went to school, kids didn't pick on me. Because in Korea, I was the only handicapped kid to go to a regular school. And kids would pick on me every single day, both physically and verbally. So this was long before bullying term was around, but they would just constantly pick on me. But I had this desire to go to school to learn. I'm not sure why, but I wanted to learn. So I would just go there and take it. And then when I could come home, I would line up all the handicapped kids, and I would just hit them really hard one at a time because I got so frustrated. And I'll do another story, tie that together a little bit later on. So I would just continue to pray at nighttime. During the daytime, I was always happy because I never wanted my parents to think, what mistake did we make adopting not only an older child, handicapped child, but older sibling. Those are the least likely kids to be adopted. So I'm so thankful for my parents to took a risk on me. And so in 1968, I became an American citizen. I remember my mom and dad said, now you can be anything you want in the world except the President of the United States. Well, who wants to be the president anyway, right? So I said, oh, okay. And they said, and they were just matter of fact telling me, not trying to scare me. And I'm only 12 years old by then. She said, but if you do something really bad, like I said, how bad? I mean, like a felony. I didn't even know what felony was, but they said if you do something really, really bad, you have to go back to Korea. I said, you mean like a vacation? They said, no, they'll deport you. I'm thinking, what does that mean? You can never come back. You mean I would go back to Korea and never come back? Well, if you do something really, really bad. I said, I'm going to be the best darn kid in the world because I don't want to go back to the orphanage. So I try really hard to please my parents and just constantly do my best. And because of it, I strove and I did really well. I'm very goal-driven. So I would do that, but then I could never say I was wrong. Because something was wrong with me, they're going to ship me back to Korea. So I'm just thinking, okay, well, I'm just going to be the best kid, but I can't say I'm wrong. How can I say I'm sorry? And so, well, I've got to be a perfect kid. So that's how I grew up, thinking I had to be really, really be the best. And I also, when I remember I grew up, when I was growing up, I asked my mom and dad, tell me about how to get to heaven. And so they said, well, God is like a spoke of a wheel. He's in the middle, and all the religions go to God. And I said, oh, okay. So we just happened to be Christians. I said, oh, good. But then I thought you had to earn your way to heaven by being a good person. So that's what I tried to be, a really good person, because I'm not, but I tried to be. So I went to regular school. I'm not going to go into all my details. I have a book for you to read. I'm sorry, it's in English only, but it goes through all the detail. And so I remember, growing up, I asked my mom and dad, I said, what are the best universities in the country? And they said, Ivy League school and Stanford. And I said, well, I'm going to go to one of them. And they said, Steve, by then they had 7 kids. I said, look around, we have 7 kids. And these schools are very, very expensive. We don't have any money saved up for you to go to college. You can live at home, but we don't have any money. And secondly, they're very, very hard to get into, which means you're not that smart. I'm not that smart. There's no way I'm going to get into this school. But I said, God will provide, I told them. They're probably thinking, what is this kid talking about? God will provide. So I share with you this story because I ended up going to Cornell University. And you can go to the next slide. I graduated. I did not only attended, I graduated from Cornell University. And then I went to Northwestern for my MBA. And again, I'm telling you these things because God was answering every one of my prayer. And there you see a picture there. That was in 1982 in May. And Suki, she and I would have been like 26, 27 years old, really young. And you can see what a beautiful bride she is there. She still is 41 years later. But I'll tell you the story about how all this happened. I'm sharing this with you because God was literally answering my prayer. But in the time, though, I thought I was really good. So I'll share this, how we met and how I asked her to marry me. So we were high school friends, but we never dated. There's only like five families in Anchorage, Alaska at the time. So there weren't that many. And so, but her brother and my brother we went to different high schools. And I had not seen her for years. And I went to University of Alaska for 2 years, and Suki went also. And I remember, she's pretty cute. I want to get to spend some time with her. So I asked her, would you teach me Korean? I had no interest in speaking Korean, okay? I said, okay, I'll teach you. So we would meet after school, and my dad would have to drop me off, and she would teach me. She's thinking, boy, this guy's kind of not too smart. He can't learn very well. But no, and I want to keep on seeing you so you could teach me Korean. So we saw each other that way. We never dated at all. And so in 82, I had just returned from studying abroad outside of Paris. And so I came home Christmas 81. And Suki doesn't like to go shopping. I don't like to go shopping. But her parents asked her, would you come with us and translate? Because they wanted to go shopping. She had to translate for them because they can speak English. I didn't want to go, but my mom and dad said, well, let's go. And I said, sure, I'll go. So actually, I was in the Sears Mall. I was just sitting outside, not in the stores. I was just waiting for my parents to come out. And who walks by? Suki and her mom and dad. And she was wearing a cute little French beret hat on. What pops in my mind? I just came from France. Oh, French beret hat? Oh, let me ask you a question. She goes, yes. Do you know how they kiss in France? She said, no. So I reached up, and she was wearing like a 3-inch high heel. And I'm, barely 5 feet. She's like 5'9" by now. So I'm trying to reach up to her. She bends down. I kissed her on each cheek like this, very debonair. And she's turning all red, and her father's saying a bunch of stuff in Korean to me. I'm thinking, oh, boy. So not too smart. I act first, then I think about what I should do. I said, oh, that was a dumb thing to do. And she was all red, and her father said, she goes, oh, okay, see you later. So and I said, oh, that was a dumb thing to do. And then I would see her at Christmas time, come to my house, and I would invite myself to her house, parents' house, and I would tell my parents, oh, she only invited me. So she's thinking, a whole family's coming over. I only show up, I'm smart, right? She has all this Korean food. Wow, I get to eat all that. So I said, where's the rest of your family? Oh, no, it was just me. So I had to hold attention for a whole evening. So then I go back to Northwestern. It's cold winter in Chicago. And I had a 10-year plan in my wallet. I actually wrote it down that 2 years after I graduated from Northwestern, I would have $32,000 saved up, and then I would ask somebody to marry me. And I said, well, it's at least got $32,000 maybe. Back then that was a fair amount of money, and that's good reasoning. So I said, no, I'm not going to ask her. So another week goes by. Then I start calling her, and landlines were really expensive to make phone calls. And then she would call me back, and I used to write her letters, and she couldn't read my handwriting, so she'd have to call me. She said, what did you write here? What did you write here? What did you write here? So her bills were more than mine, because I had to explain to her what I wrote. And so I just said, I'm just going to ask her to marry me. We never dated. So I said, well, what are the probability? Yes, no. If it's maybe, it would turn to yes or no later. So I thought, well, you know what, 50-50, that's a pretty good chance. That's what I'm thinking, right? And it could be 1 in a billion. So I said, okay. So I pick up the phone. I said, I have a question. She said, another question? I said, yes. I said, she goes, yes. Will you marry me? She said, yes, I will. And I said, I don't think you understood the question. I said, would you marry me, please? She said, yes, I'll marry you. Then I'm thinking, now what do I say? Because I thought she was going to make, pros and cons. Let me think about it. I'll get back to you. And I just, so I cover up the phone and say, yoo-hoo. And then I send her a one-way ticket to come from Anchorage to Chicago, where I was going to school. And so we were married, and then her uncle actually would not speak to her. Her uncle was Caucasian. And he would not speak to her for 2 years because he told her that I had hypnotized her. Why would this orphan kid without a job, you ask her to marry me, and she says yes. She had all these rich suitors, millionaires from Korea. She was a pretty hot catch in Alaska. They wanted to marry her, right? But she says no to all of them. And I asked her, she says yes. So her uncle said I had hypnotized her, that you will marry me, and otherwise, why would she marry me? And I didn't know either. But at the time, I said, well, I must be pretty good. Why did she marry me? So I'm thinking, because we get married, and we are now, I'm climbing the corporate ladder. I'm working with Johnson & Johnson. And she's dragging me to these Buddhist temples. So I said, well, sure, I'll go to, I'm open-minded. I'll go to temples with you. So we used to go to one temple and do these things and making those noises. So she would drag me all over New York, because we were living in New Jersey in that area. And then so God used a emergency appendectomy to move us from New York City to Evansville, Indiana. And she's praying to God, lying on her back over on the bed, without bending over, just literally praying like this, for a baby. And she was praying to Buddha for a baby, okay? And God reminds her, no, you have to pray to a God that can create life. So she actually saw a bright light in our bedroom. It was really dark there, and she saw bright light in the shape of a cross. And so she tells me, we have to go to church. And I said, why? Is somebody getting married? Because we never went to church except for maybe Christmas and Easter. She goes, no, she was praying to God. And then you have to ask her the whole story. But she said, so we said, okay. And she said, God actually shared with her, you'll have a baby boy, and he's not here. He'll be coming tomorrow, physically, okay, to Palm Springs. But so God, sure enough, we ended up having a baby boy. And so we're attending a church, and I was so happy that we have a healthy baby boy. And this pastor, and by the way, by now we've actually gone to this church for a while, and he says we raise our hand to get baptized. So, but he doesn't. Maybe he just did it for all of the new congregants. But he said, I'm going to come to your house and spend some time with you. I said, great. So he comes to our house in Indiana, and he says, if you die tomorrow, where would you go? I said, well, I'm a pretty good person. I don't make too many mistakes. That's what I thought. I make a lot of mistakes. My wife is telling you right now. And so he said, I said, well, I don't make too many mistakes, but do you believe there's a God? I said, yes. Do you think he's holy? I said, yes. Do you think you are? I said, no, but I don't make too many mistakes. I'm a very good person. Playing in my mind. And he said, would you like to know for sure how would you like to get to heaven? I said, yes, I would. Who wouldn't? So then he shares with me Romans 6:23, 3:23, Ephesians 2:8 and 9. And so I accept Christ as my Savior because I want to get to heaven, but I do not accept him as a Lord because I don't want anybody telling me what to do, including our Lord, because I have my 10-year plan. I don't want him to get in the way. So I accept him as my Lord, my Savior. Suki accepts him as Lord and Savior, and she's crying. I said, what are you crying about? I'm so happy Jesus accepted me with my sins. I said, get over it. Jesus loves everybody, not just you. She was crying, and then 7 years goes by. I'm giving her a really hard time. I mean, really bad time. She would say, let's go to church. She's got our kids ready to go to church. By then, we had 2 kids. Our daughter was born. I said, we went to church last Sunday. I want to sleep in. And she goes, no, we have to go. And I said, okay. And then I used to call her, you're a Bible thumper. I used to just make fun of her all the time. In the meantime, she finally said, Steve, I'm leaving you. And she got to that point. And then, and this, again, it's a long story. She actually left, but she came back to tell the kids she was leaving because of me, not them. And by then, she also cried out to God and said, God, if you want to change Steve, you change him. I can't change him. And within like a week, Suki signs me up to a Promise Keeper event. I don't know if you remember those. Those are big men's conferences. They had them in stadiums where literally 50, 60,000 men would come to a Christian 2-night retreat. So I said, I'm not going. She said, well, I already got you the ticket. I said, well, return and get your money back. She goes, no, they won't take your money back. I'm too cheap, right? Too frugal. I said, no, okay, I'll go because I don't want to waste the conference fee. So I go to the Promise Keeper event. That was June of 1994 in Indianapolis. And so I'm sitting there, and on the base, on the floor, they have all the handicapped people in wheelchairs, and on the stadium, the regular able people. So I'm sitting there with literally thousands of disabled people. And the pastor the first night says, the worst sin in your life. I'm thinking, okay, it's not me, the worst sin, right? I'm thinking Hitler, Ted Bundy back then, but it's not me. So he said, the worst sin in your life is your pride, because your pride steals God's glory. All of a sudden, he's talking to me. I see my life passing by really fast, but also in slow motion. I'm starting thinking, why was I the only handicapped kid to be adopted out of the orphanage into a loving family? I go to the best schools in the country when my parents could not afford to send me. I wasn't smart enough to get in there. I have a wonderful wife who I never dated. Probably a good thing, because if I dated her, she would say no. But and then I had 2 wonderful children. I had a wonderful job, and a house and cars, everything. I realized God was answering every one of my prayers when I cried out to him in the nighttime. But I was taking the glory for it. Look what I've done. Look what I've done. Look what I've done. And that night, I said, Lord, forgive me for stealing your glory. And then I accepted Jesus as my Lord and Savior. And I am so thankful that our God is so patient, because he literally took he could have taken a 2x4 and hit me in the head, because I deserved it. But he was patient for 7 years to say, no, he's a God that just knocks. He will not come in unless you invite him in. And so I'm so thankful. It took me 7 years until I accepted him as my Savior. Then 7 years later as my Lord. And after that, God started to use me slowly, but I began to start to mature. So now I'm going to tell you how I became to work for World Vision. If you go to the next slide, please. There we go. So there was a first nonprofit was World Vision, and it was in 1999, 2000. Do you remember when the stock market tanked in the late 99, early 2000? And so I was the VP of marketing for Ameritrade, And so I took that job because I didn't want to keep on traveling from Omaha, Nebraska to California. I did that for every week for 7 months. I didn't want to do that, so I quit my job with ConAgra and became working at Ameritrade. So when the stock market crashed, they laid me off, which was really a huge blessing in disguise. I was thankful about that. So I had time to fly to Ilsan, Korea, Seoul, Korea, to attend the funeral of the founder who passed away. And she was a godly woman. She passed away when she was like 96 years old, Bertha Holt. And so at the funeral, I met my childhood friend. His name is Kyung-soo. You see him up there. And he has severe cerebral palsy, and very smart, but he's hard for him to speak. And so he was speaking, and Suki was translating. And so I said, "Do you remember me, Kyung-soo?" And he said, "Yes, Myung-soo, I remember you." I said, "Well, what do you remember me about?" He said, "I used to beat him up all the time." I said, "Oh no, I'm really strong, and here is at a funeral, and that's what he remembers me by." And I said, "Would you forgive me for what I did to you growing up?" And he said, Myung-soo, I forgave you a long time ago because Jesus forgave me of my sins." And when he said that, I was speechless. Then I started thinking, what am I doing with my life? Here I'm trying to work hard to make companies rich, myself rich. So I remember after that I said, "Lord, tell me what you want me to do, and I will do it." Now, for anybody, but especially young people, when you pray that prayer, God will answer you. And so I found out the orphanage I grew up in, Holt, was initially helped supported by Bob Pierce, the founder of World Vision. And we were not new to World Vision. Actually, Suki was sponsoring a couple children from World Vision. And I said, "Well, you do what you want." I used to tell her, "We can't help all children in the world, but if you want to, you go ahead and do that." So I was not thinking that I would work for a nonprofit. That was the furthest thing from my mind. But when Kyung-soo said that, so I literally, and again, read my book there, I go into detail. So I picked up the phone and called the senior VP of marketing at World Vision. And that's how, after many interviews, they hired me as VP of marketing operation for World Vision. And God is so patient because during that time, I was consulting for a Christian university called Grace University in Omaha, Nebraska, because I was laid off for 4 months. And during that time, I was consulting, but also I was looking for another job because, your severance package only lasts so long. So I interviewed at Hallmark, and so that was the job I really wanted. It's a great brand. It was a VP, general manager of a division. It was not too far from Omaha, and also Suki is an artist, and she's gifted in many ways, but she could have also worked at Hallmark. And so that's the job I really wanted. But the offer from World Vision came first on Monday. And so, and then I was at chapel at the Grace University. The chapel that week was from John 4:35. And Jesus is talking to his disciples. Then he says, "You say another 4 more months than the harvest. I tell you the truth, the field is ripe for harvest now." What that was telling Suki and I was that don't wait till you retire, then help, serve me. Do it now. So it was so clear because the offer from Hallmark came the next day. Had the offer to Hallmark came first, I probably would have jumped on it because I would have said, "Well, that's God's will. Let's take it." But no, the offer from World Vision came first, and it was for a lot less money than what the Hallmark job was. And so it was a joint decision. I talked to Suki about it, talked to our kids about it because we didn't have that much money saved up. We could have sent them to state school, but not private schools. But we believe that was God's call, and that's how we made the call. And when we do the Lord's work, it's really not a sacrifice because at the end, we see it's much more of a blessing. And, we talk about Christmas because Jesus came here to sacrifice himself to give us the ultimate gift of everlasting life. And also, I want to remind you, and especially myself as well. I'm not sitting here today on my own. We have so many people that helps us. And think about my parents too, all the other ways, but also thinking about my wife for 41 years. You know, she sacrificed her life for me so I could do what I do. She gave up a career in banking to artwork. I mean, she's an artist, and she gave up all of that so that I can do what I'm doing, because God gave her a vision that someday God will use me in a mighty way for the kingdom. So in her faithfulness, she did what the Lord tell her to do. So we don't do this by ourselves. I'm so thankful to my wife and for all of you, because we cannot do what we do without you, because we do not get any funding from the government. We only get from private donors and for some company. So now I will share with you what MAP does. So about 10 years ago, and how am I doing with my time right now? 10 more minutes. Okay, thank you. So that was my testimony. Now I'll talk about what MAP does here. So that was important, because it really is really important to share about. This is about God's grace in my life. This is why I am here today and doing the work together. So about 10 years ago, I get a call from a recruiter, and the recruiter says, we have the best job for you as CEO of MAP International. I was joking. I said, who uses MAP? Everybody has GPS. And they said, no. I said, MAPS, they said medical assistance program, now medicine for all people. But I told them, no, thank you, because I had told the CEO of the place I worked for, Child Fund, that I'd be there at least 3 to 5 years. And I was just there 2.5 years, and I wanted to keep my commitment to be there at least 3 to 5 years. So I told the recruiter, no, thank you. And so I told Suki about it. I came home. She said, you said MAP is a Christian organization? I said, yes. She said, don't you think we should at least pray about it first? You know, I act first, and I think later. I said, you're right. So we prayed about it, and I looked at the 990. That's 990s are what you file with the government if you're a nonprofit. Churches don't have to, but nonprofits have to. I looked at it, and they had a lot of gift in kind, but not much in cash, and you have to pay people in cash, not in gift in kind. So I told her, oh, I'm not qualified. No, I don't want to go there, and because it's going to be a bigger job, and I'll have to take another salary cut to go there. So I told her, no, I'm not qualified. So she said, Steve, I think God prepared you for the role. You know, why did I have polio? We know God doesn't waste any hurt. When God allows for some hurt in your life, we all do, He will not waste it. And then also, why did I work for a pharmaceutical company for 18 years, and then nonprofit back then for about 14 years? I think God prepared you for the role. And so she convinced me to apply. I said, okay, I'll apply. And then once I realized what MAP really does, I'm so grateful that Suki convinced me to apply there, and because God did prepare me for the role. And so now I'll talk about what MAP does and the impact you're having by donating to MAP. Next slide, please. So MAP is a charity navigator, rates all nonprofits in the United States, and they look at all nonprofits of certain size, and they rate MAP #1 of all nonprofits in the United States for our stewardship and the impact that we make around the world. Next slide. And so why we do what we do is really important. How it's important, but why you do what you do is critically important. And so we take the verse out of Matthew 25:36, when Jesus said, when I was sick, you looked after me. That's the only thing we do. We let our partners do the food, do education, maternal child health. We do health and health supplies. Next slide, please. And so how we do our work is we are located in Brunswick, Georgia, which is 1 hour south of Savannah, Georgia. And most of our medicines get loaded onto 20 and 40-foot containers, and those containers get loaded onto tankers that get shipped all around the world. And then, so most of our containers are going to ship out of Savannah or Charleston, South Carolina. You can see in the warehouse we have 6 levels of storage in a temperature-controlled environment. Next slide, please. And fortunately, MAP is expanding. I think if you go a couple more, I can show you the new. Yep. Nope. Okay. I guess the new slide, actually we had an open house last Friday, and God blessed us with a brand new warehouse that's right next to the existing warehouse, and that's 43,500 square feet. So it is truly a blessing that we now have this warehouse, that we could have that many more people around the world. The World Health Organization estimates there are 2 billion people in the world that do not have access to life-saving medicine. Simple medicines such as antibiotics, hypertension, cardiovascular medicine, diabetes medicine. Those medicines, most 2 billion people in the world do not have access to it. And that's why we do what we do. Next slide. So how we work is we have on the left side pharmaceutical companies that will donate us medicine. We call gift in kind, GIK, because they cannot sell it because it's getting too close to expiring. They have not expired yet, but they can't sell it, so they will donate it to us, so that we can give it for free of charge to other people that need it. And on the right side, we have partners on the ground that have staff on the ground that will then ship it to, once they receive it, they'll clear custom, and they'll ship it to private to hospitals and clinics, schools and orphanages that need these life-saving medicines. Most of them are Christian organizations, but some of them are not. We work with Palestinian organization, Muslim organization, Jewish organization, because while MAP is a Christian organization, we help all people, regardless of ethnicity, gender, or religious belief. Next slide, please. In 2023, MAP helped we shipped medicine to 96 countries. Next slide. And so this is what we do. Medicines and health supplies, and we also respond to disaster response, and that's where you came in a big way. Next slide, please. So the medical missions program, these are there doctors in this audience, in the church here, congregation? Doctors? Well, maybe future doctors. Okay, so the doctors that go on mission trips to do surgical, like for cleft palate surgery, different surgeries, cataract surgery, we provide those items as well in addition to the medicine. So they'll order it, and they'll take it with them as personal luggage, and then that way, that's how we get to the 96. Half of the 96 countries are through containers that we ship in 20, 40-foot containers, and the other half through these medical missions program. Next slide. So disaster response. Unfortunately, there are too many disasters around the world, either natural or man-made. Man-made being Ukraine war, the conflict in the Middle East, and I will show you where your donations went to this year, which is so helpful because, again, we do not get funding from government, so we have to raise private money to do this work. Next slide. We also have something called disaster health kits. And these components we have to purchase these items because they have to fit in a certain bag size and it goes into a box. And so it has things like shampoo, soap, washcloth, toothpaste, toothbrush, has a first aid kit. So really, we're providing some humanity for people who are fleeing a disaster situation, either man-made or natural. Next slide, please. Okay, looks like we didn't get the, you didn't get the latest, I'm sorry, you didn't get the latest PowerPoint, but let me share it with you where your money went to. What we have is called IEHK, Interagency Emergency Health Kit. Oh, there we go, okay. Let's go to that first. Then what this is there is, the WHO formulates this, so any disaster, these are the most needed medicines and supplies that are needed. So the disaster, IEHK, will serve 10,000 people for 90 days. Imagine 10,000 people, doesn't matter what, earthquake, could be war. So you actually purchase 2 IEHKs with your generous donations. Next slide, please. Your first one went to the Morocco earthquake, and that was a devastating, and again, we only respond when our partner says we can get these items into those countries. So normally, we're not there within a day or two. We just have to wait, sometimes a week or two, because our partners on the ground have to get permission from the local government to import these. So we just can't start shipping it to them. So once they get clearance, yes, they can accept it, this is how, we will then airlift these. These are airlifted. We purchase these items from Europe, out of Netherlands, and they're coming. You can see in the far left, there's actually 2 of those, and sometimes we have to repack it into lower ones because they have to go into to an airplane storage area. So the first one went with World Hope into Morocco earthquakes. So next one, please. The second one, literally that was last week. I was in Brunswick, and that's one is going to Gaza with the United Palestinian Appeal, and they will actually be shipped to Amman, Jordan, and then they will go into the Gaza when they allow humanitarian help to get in there. So we just can start shipping product. And so that's just showing you I'm almost 5 feet tall. That's the height of it. And it's 4 by 4 by 4. And again, we have to purchase these items. We air freight it. Just the air freight alone is $3,000. We buy it for $12,000, and $3,000 air freight is $15,000. And that's why your generous donation went there. And you've actually helped 20,000 people, 10,000 for the Morocco earthquake, and now 10,000 for the Gaza relief. Next slide. MAP does have a domestic meds program. We have actually 1 clinic in California, but mostly we have 42 in Georgia. There's 1.8 million Georgians without health insurance, and these are the working poor. They may be working at McDonald's and without any health insurance, so they get seen for free at these safety net clinics. But when they walk out the clinic with a prescription, they have to have some money to buy it, even the copay. So now MAP provides actual 1 bottle at a time, free of charge to these clinics. So when they walk out, they will actually walk out with a bottle of medicine. We also have a mobile clinic. Some of them will go to homeless people to provide medicine to them. So that's really a very important part. We're expanding this around the Southeast and also in Texas and California. Next slide, please. And Bill Fig event, again, I'm not going into too much detail, but we have an award that we give to the global health leaders. In 2018, we provided the award to President and Mrs. Carter, and because they respected Bill Figge so much, they actually showed up at the award to receive the award. And it was such a privilege for me. Here's an orphan back in the 60s, come to the United States, and I get to give the President and Mrs. Carter the Global Health Award. And so it was just such an honor. And then Ambassador Andrew Young also received the award. Next slide. And so we had a visit by President and Mrs. Carter to MAP, and it's amazing how God orchestrates things to happen. And so we are God serves. This God we serve is a God of logistics, and He knows all circumstances we're in. And I'm so thankful and grateful for what you're doing. And I cannot say with the words how much we appreciate your support from MAP. And I will share some pictures with my MAP colleagues and with the board when I get back. So thank you very much. I really appreciate it. And the last slide, I have a book right there. It's called Crutch of Success. Actually, my daughter took a picture of it in our condo in Atlanta, and her friend designed the cover. And Suki and Rachel helped me to edit the book. It's in English, so it's not in Korean, sorry. And so I'll be happy to sign copies for you over there at the end. So thank you again for your time, for allowing me to share my testimony about MAP. Thank you. Buksanim.